Thank you very much, Dirk. And so, yes, it's a big challenge now to stand between you and the coffee, but I'll do my best. So it really is a pleasure to be here with you all again in physical format. It's lovely to see so many colleagues and friends again in person at UNWTO headquarters. So welcome, and thank you to my colleagues in the Sustainable Development Department for giving me the opportunity to share a little bit about our work and our progress on this statistical framework for measuring the sustainability of tourism. Now, let me also start with a quote now that we've gotten into this. So Joseph Stiglitz famously said, "What we measure affects what we do. And if we measure the wrong thing, we will do the wrong thing." So I think this captures very well a bit the sentiment of the times that we live in. So there is a realization that we need to go beyond a lot of the traditional measures and look at tourism more holistically. So statistics, if I can get this to work. There, yes. So statistics is about mobilizing the power of data to make better decisions in the interest of the public good. Now, I underline in the interest of the public good. This has traditionally been the focus of statistics, and it continues to be. This diagram by Walter Rademacher, the former chief statistician of Eurostat, illustrates the statistical process. Now, we are in an era of data overload, and the statistical process helps us to transform raw data into information that is more meaningful. And this data can come from various sources, right? It can come from surveys, it can come from big data, it can come from administrative sources. And the statistical process, what it does is it adds and it refines the data to ensure that we can trust it and to ensure that the data is a good reflection of reality. Now, usually this entails balancing elements of relevance, accuracy, timeliness, accessibility, and comparability. It also requires things like transparency, impartiality, methodological soundness, and abiding by scientific principles. Now, if we go back to this diagram, standards play a crucial role in the statistical process. They help us move from the raw data to the indicators to support decision-making. They provide the agreed concepts, definitions, and classifications for measuring in a way that is comparable and credible. Indicators can then be derived to facilitate interpretation and analysis to build knowledge and feed decisions. Now, in tourism, we have currently two frameworks that you will all be aware of, I'm sure, endorsed by the UN as statistical standards. They are the International Recommendation in Tourism Statistics, which guides the production of comparable data on visitor flows, right? The famous arrivals, their expenditure, characteristics of visitors, and the tourism industries. And then we have the tourism satellite accounts. And this provides the agreed structure to derive indicators like tourism GDP and the value added of tourism industries and related jobs. Now, it's against this backdrop that UNWTO, in partnership with the UN Statistics Division, leading countries, international organizations, many of your INSTO members as well, and others, is developing a statistical framework for measuring the sustainability of tourism, or in short, MST. Now, the way that statistics have evolved over time means that there are different statistical domains. You will be familiar with economic statistics that helps to support economic policy. We have agricultural statistics that supports agricultural policy, and the same for environment, the same for trade, you name it. Plus, there is a lot of data production going on across these traditional areas, and certainly when we consider things like sustainability. Now, because tourism is so transversal, and especially when we consider its sustainability, a lot of data is already being produced across these different areas, right? And this data can be useful to better understand also the sustainability of tourism. So it's necessary to integrate these different bits and pieces across the different areas in a structured and agreed way, so that it is not only comparable, within, but also comparable and nicely nested within the agreed way that we measure everything else in our economies, right? Because this will allow our measurement to be comparable not only between destinations, between countries, but also across territorial levels, right? Between the national and the subnational level. And also, very importantly, allow us to compare the performance of tourism to the performance of other economic alternatives, right, in a territory. So this is precisely the aim of the statistical framework. We are constantly reminded of the huge need from policy for better data to inform on the real challenges facing tourism. Data that goes beyond arrivals, that considers social, environmental, and also economic from the perspective of sustainability. And this framework will bring much needed comparability to such data by forging an international consensus on the key concepts, definitions, and organization structures for this data. It will help to link the indicators with the underlying data that might already exist, data that might have to be reorganized, or data that perhaps would have to be produced from scratch. And because priorities and data landscapes vary tremendously between country to country, destination to destination, an agreed framework helps to focus the efforts on data that matters the most. Now, there's a lot of excellent work ongoing at international, national, and subnational levels, and it makes sense that there are different indicator sets that emerge to cater to different circumstances and policy priorities. And an internationally agreed framework will help to support the comparability of these efforts. So that, for example, if we choose to look at water use by tourism, that we all understand and measure it in the same way. In much the same way that we all understand arrivals or tourism GDP in much the same way, and we measure it in much the same way, or at least we try to, right? And this helps us benchmark. Now, this is a visual summary of the framework under development, and you will see that it includes elements on the three sort of core dimensions of sustainability. On the economic side, of course, we have tourism value added, GDP expenditure, employment from an employment demand side, so the business demand for employment, infrastructure assets, business demographics, very important, how many businesses start up, how many businesses die out over a certain period. On the social dimension, looking more at the employment supply and characteristics of persons employed, decent work, culture and heritage, health, education and skills, and community and visitor perceptions. And on the environmental side, a key element, although not the only one, consists of linking the tourism satellite accounts with the so-called system of environmental economic accounts. This is the agreed standard for measuring environmental aspects in an economy. And here, MST provides the conceptual guidance that has been developed between UNWTO and the UN specialized group in this area, which is the Committee of Experts on Environmental Economic Accounting. And in this area, we have data that includes water use and energy use by the tourism industries, greenhouse gas emissions, things like land use, and also ecosystem condition and services related to tourism areas, wildlife in protected areas, and green jobs, just to name a few. Now, of course, not all aspects will be equally relevant in all countries or in all destinations, and nor at all spatial levels. So the framework has the intention to foster a demand-driven approach and a modular data implementation. Now, let's have a look at some examples. And as the framework is being developed, right, it's being fed by many good practices going on worldwide, and a range of countries and subnational regions have been involved in testing the framework for both policy relevance, right? Does it really cater to information needs on the one hand, and also feasibility? Is it practical to implement? Is it possible? Right? Because we can have a beautiful framework, but if it's really difficult or requires data that is not available, then it's as good as useless. So we have about 55 countries, entities worldwide that have implemented the MST approach, plan to implement, or have expressed concrete interest in piloting MST. And as you will see, different pilots have implemented different parts of the framework at different scales in line with their different priorities and their circumstances. So for example, in Austria, tourism provides 2,000 euros of income per capita. And this might help explain why it has a fairly good acceptance rate by the local population, which was also analyzed. In the Canary Islands, for example, it was found that 47 tourism micro destinations cover 90% of overnight stays in hotels, but only 1.6% of the territory. That's very interesting. In Egypt, for example, they derived water and energy use by tourism in the accommodation industry and found that overall, inbound tourism uses more energy, but domestic tourism uses more water. In 12 protected areas in Uganda, tourism expenditure on wildlife watching triplicated between 2011 and 2019. In the South African region of KwaZulu-Natal, the value of nature-based tourism was estimated at almost 13 billion rands. And Mexico was able to put in perspective the socioeconomic costs and benefits of tourism at archaeological sites and protected areas. And of course, Costa Rica, the value added of nature-based tourism represents 1.6% of their GDP, with half of this value coming from 5 destinations only. Now, these and other pilots are showcasing the relevance and the feasibility of the framework. And you can have a look at them at a dedicated publication shown on the slide, and we will be issuing a second version of this publication in November this year. So all in all, you will see that it becomes possible to measure in a comparable way the sort of breadth of elements that comprise tourism sustainability from an environmental, social, and economic perspective at different territorial levels with a single integrated framework. Now, you might wonder what the role of UNWTO is in all of this. Well, because statistics is in essence an agreed way of measuring something, it's fundamentally a consensus. There are, of course, important technical elements, and the framework focuses a lot on research and development, bringing different stakeholders together. But there are, of course, also strategic and political implications to all of this. Measuring something in one way or another affects the results, right? And so this has many implications, and it's important for countries to agree so that ultimately all countries and all stakeholders will be able to find themselves in the results and have this commonly agreed, trusted information to feed decisions in the interest of the public good. Now, UNWTO accompanies this process of consensus building and also the technical R&D efforts. And indeed, UNWTO has a specific mandate in tourism statistics given by the UN, and you can find it here. So it's also very much part of our mandate in this area. Now, in terms of the institutional setup of MST, it's a joint effort being carried out by leading countries, organizations, including the UN Statistics Division in New York, our colleagues at the International Labour Organization, Eurostat, OECD, UNWTO, and others. And UNWTO is currently in the process of relaunching the multidisciplinary and multi-stakeholder group of experts for leading this effort. And the next meeting will be held on 14-16 December, where a new version of the framework will be discussed in the group. Now, finally, let me just finish up with some of the policy implications. So in this current context of building back better, different policy mechanisms have identified the relevance of MST to guide data production and support comparability. So for example, well, there are some examples here. You will find the ALULA framework endorsed by the G20 leaders, the European Parliament resolution on establishing a strategy for sustainable tourism. It also forms an integral part of the Pacific Sustainable Tourism Policy and its accompanying statistical strategy that is based on MST. And of course, it's also being supported by the UN Statistical Commission and UNDESA. Now with this, I come to the end. And please don't hesitate to reach out to me if you would be interested in learning more. And I very much look forward to learning more from you and seeing how we can collaborate in this space. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Chair.